Hey, it's 1990 again.
And that was Lost in the Twilight Hall from Blind Guardian's Tales from the Twilight World.
Little Kai Hansen to wake you up wherever you're at, whatever time it is.
Oh yeah, that's a barn burner right there, man. Mm-hmm. It's kind of the introduction of modern power metal in a sense. You know, kind of came off of this record. You know, Blind Guardian had a couple of records prior to this.
And then we got a glut of garbage.
Yeah.
Except for Primal Fear, which is a masterpiece.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, you had a couple Halloween records in the 80s that were pretty tolerable, and then this, in a way, started the slow birth of power metal that kind of peaked by the end of the decade.
Rhapsody and all those kind of things that we could have lived without.
Nocturnal Rites, Hammerfall. But Blind Guardian sits at the top of the heap, and we talked about that back in the 1995 show that we did when we kind of highlighted Imaginations from the Other Side. I think this and Imaginations are probably their two best records from top to bottom. You know,
I'm pretty partial to the first two as well.
All right, well,
I like
first two are great.
The Barbarian like
cover
and the
thrash,
Mr. Sandman. You know,
well, but that was on Mr. Sandman was on the that collection of like weird B-sides and stuff like that.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
the Barbarian was on which one was that?
That was on
Follow the Blind.
Follow the Blind. I think.
Okay.
So. Yeah, but anyways, this is
harmonize.
It is not a Blind Guardian show, but we decided to kick off 1990 in style with energy and pizzazz.
Because we're going to take it down a little bit.
Yeah, we are. We're going to get a little sensitive, a little. I don't want to say grungy, but definitely darker, slower, churning kind of songs here in a little bit. But well,
1990 is a very transitional year. Thrash is slowly petering out as we know it, and,
but it will be a peak year for thrash, and then it kind of starts the decline from here. You know.
But yeah, after 1990, thrash is pretty much as a scene, it's pretty much done. Outside of a handful of bands that are still putting out decent stuff, and
it's oddly a quiet year for death metal. even though 88 and 89 were so like explosive with the birth of sort of death metal in America and in England and a little bit in Sweden, but we'll talk more about the Sweden thing later. But it was a relatively quiet year for some of the extreme stuff. So this is really sort of the last show for thrash, and also kind of the introduction of the templates that are going to dominate the popular side of 90s metal, which is, the grunge stuff, the stoner metal, more the doomier stuff. It's almost like they've, within the popular context, Metallica and Slayer and Testament and Megadeth have taken speed to like its furthest commercial place. And now everything has to almost sort of, go backwards, Well,
the 90s we see I guess it's a period of a lot of experimentation and people wanting to grow outside of their genre constraints.
Yeah.
So we get to see new metal come and go,
which is
quickly.
more the later half of the 90s. You know?
So I think up until 95 is the kind of like the petering point to where stuff either, you've got like bands that basically have, like Vader, that have basically done a permutation of one record their entire career, like both thrower. Yeah. But then you've got your My Dang Brides and all those that have gone through their
Paradise Lost,
their ups and downs. Sure. But this is, I think, up until 95. That's like just like a huge amount of creativity.
Yeah, and that's why we chose 95 as one of our crucial years earlier. And we've made it to episode 99, if you've been keeping track. And this is, in our humblest opinions, probably the second greatest year in metal. Although on any given day, I think it can be kind of interchangeable. But definitely a standout year, 90. And you can't get a better year in terms of thrash outside of maybe 86. Those 2 years, I think, compete a little bit.
Well, this was a huge year for me buying tapes. I'll tell you that
for sure, without a doubt. So there's some crazy monsters in the background trying to get out, probably because they know Danzig's on the way. But in 1990, some records that we unfortunately don't have time to get to, but we should probably kind of highlight, that were kind of in the more traditional metal realm, which is where we're going to kind of start the show as we sort of transition towards the more extreme side.
Bruce Dickinson's Tattooed Millionaire, a very overlooked album. I think everybody should go out and buy it.
You're
if you're
a big fan. And we highlighted Dickinson's solo career on an episode, actually. So Queensryche Empire, which was a big commercial success for those guys. Iron Maiden's No Prayer for the Dying, kind of a weak release.
One of their worst records next to Virtual 11, I would say.
Yeah. Bring Your Daughter to Slaughter, wasn't that the big song off that record?
No, that's not Fear the Dark.
Are you sure? Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow. Then that record really is horrible. Because I thought that might have been
this had Running
song.
Silent, Running Deep. There wasn't a whole lot of good songs on that record.
Yikes. Yeah, because that Bring Your Daughter to Slaughter is from Dream Child.
Oh, yeah.
From Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, I think. Yeah. But, Eister's self-titled debut, Suicidal Tendencies, Light Camera Revolution, Prongs Beg to Differ, the self-titled from Godflesh, the second record they put out, actually. Solitude Eternus' debut, Into the Depths of Sorrow, Dio, Lock Up the Wolves, kind of again, kind of like Maiden's No Prayer for the Dying, kind of a forgettable Dio. You know? And then two records that I'll mention only because of what we're going to eventually get into in this next set, which is kind of more sort of slowed down, doomier, sledgier type stuff, is the debut from Paradise Lost, Lost Paradise, and Winter's Into Darkness. And I guess we should maybe mention what these two records meant, because they were really anomalies in the midst of a lot of other things happening. Lost Paradise was like a Death Doom record, which Death Doom really...
It didn't exist
really
at that
around,
point.
Yeah.
You had Candlemass, but you didn't have anybody singing with guttural vocals.
Yeah, exactly.
Or this heavy, kind of guitars.
Outside of Dream Death from Pittsburgh, which became Penance, but that was more of like
totally
a Tom
different
Araya type of style singing,
Had some more thrash going on. And then Winter is kind of like just a weird band upon themselves.
It's like utter despair, like almost pre-neurosis, pre-grief,
Pre-Force of Equilibrium.
Mind rot. Yeah.
They had that kind of vibe. Well, I'm trying to think of band members from Winter.
Well, Scott Lewis.
He went on to go to Brutal Truth.
And then Scott Lewis in Winter did the cover for Disrupt.
Unrest.
I do believe Unrest. Yeah, he did the collage thing there. So again, kind of a weird band, an anomaly.
The original collage.
Yeah, the original collage, not the remastered one that Relapse just put out. But so those were kind of some oddball records. But again, in the traditional metal sense, it was a pretty solid year. But as we're going to kind of talk about, or you're going to hear in this next set, you had bands that were starting to push the edges of innovation, but kind of doing it within the mainstream. And I guess the first band that we should talk about for a second is Danzig.
Danzig 2, Lucifuge.
Lucifuge, yeah.
Refuge for the Devil.
And, Mark and I have been rocking out quite a bit of Danzig this summer because the new record is solid.
It's really good.
Definitely one of the year's best traditional metal records. But this record is a little bit different than the debut.
It's much more blues based, I would say. It's much more stripped down and not quite as I don't know. I think it's got more because I think Danzig 1. It's pretty streamlined as far as there's not a whole lot of variation. There's like a good formula they got to the sound of the record, but this is kind of all over the place. You've got Killer Wolf and the song we're gonna be playing, Blood and Tears, which is almost like a Roy Orbison meets Elvis meets
definitely a tearjerker almost.
And he really belts it out. It kind of shows the level of his singing ability and stuff too.
But then you got kind of barn burners like Long Way Back from Hell, and Her Black Wings. Kind
Devil's
of
Plaything is a great song too.
Yeah,
it's a little more. It almost seems like the guitar's pulled back a little bit on the record. It's more of a vocal kind of centerpiece, I think, this time.
Sure, but I mean, he again is now with Danzig 2 kind of really establishing himself as a big figure in metal.
Big personality.
And then we're going to kind of transition from that to another band that was kind of...
Speaking of wolves,
we've got The Wolf from Trouble's Trouble. And this is a record that was hard to come by, and I've had it for a couple years on my computer, but I only recently was able to extract the record from eBay. It was kind of a nice moral victory because it's on the same label as Danzig 2, Deaf American. It was a Rick Rubin signing. And, of course, Trouble, who I've mistakenly referred to as being from Pittsburgh. Thank you for the correction on that one. They're actually from Chicago. I think I keep getting them mixed up with the whole Pittsburgh doom scene with Penance and Dream Death, and for some reason.
There you go.
I don't know. Iron Man, I think, was from Pittsburgh. A lot of stuff
to keep straight.
It gets tough. And when we talk out of our ass a lot, sometimes the facts...
Well, it's all out of memory. It's not. We don't necessarily have time to print out stuff on every single band.
It's something like I read 3 weeks ago and, whatever. But this record is different than the Troubles we played back on the 84 show and the 85 show. This is more in the tradition that's going to dominate the 90s with bands like Caius and Monster Magnet. It's more out of and I hate using the term, we'll call it doom rock, but some people refer to it as stoner rock, I guess. There's
it's rock and roll. It's a rock and roll resurgence as far as I'm concerned. It's stoner rock's such a terrible name.
I guess it has its roots in some of the late 60s, 70s type of
psychedelia.
Sound. Yeah, some of the psychedelia. And definitely Trouble has been known to throw favor to the ganj a little bit, so I can see that connotations. But The Wolf is a pretty rockin' tune. I think is one of the more underrated records, and I know there's some people that have called it one of the greatest rock records that nobody knows about.
Well, it came out in a bad year for that sound, and then it was never ever pushed again.
No, and it was really hard to find. It's been kind of out of print, and so hopefully, if you've never heard this era of Trouble, this will be a nice discovery for those of you out there, listening. And then we're going to kind of transition into two bands that will utterly dominate the first half of the 90s, Alice in Chains and Pantera. And Alice in Chains kind of falls more similar, I guess, into what Trouble and Danzig were doing, which was coming out of the more Sabbath blues-based, type doom sludge kind of sound.
Well, they've got thrash riffs. The only thing that really differentiates them is Lane Staley's vocals.
Sure.
Which was kind of funny that nobody caught on to that.
I know.
It's like these guys kind of look like a thrash band, except for this one dude.
Yep.
They sound like one.
And because they hailed from Seattle, a year later when Nirvana comes out, it basically drags any band that was even
within
close to the scene. And so suddenly Alice in Chains is a grunge band, not a metal band, and they're alternative. Whatever. They made great records, and they were definitely a big fixture in my childhood. I mowed a lot of lawns to this record, as I like to say. That's almost a throwback to Metal Manu.
I know.
This record really mows some grass.
Really mows some grass, yeah.
Manu, hopefully you're listening out there somewhere, downloading our podcast. And then Pantera, we'll talk a little bit more about when we come back, because Pantera is sort of the bridge between the 90s metal and thrash, in a way, the sort of dying movement of thrash. They're kind of almost the torchbearers, I think, of that kind of fast breakdown, but they do it in their own kind of way.
Chunk thing. I mean, they started something pretty innovative, but it ended up culminating into utter garbage.
Sure, and it influenced a lot of garbage bands.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. So on that note, we've got Danzig, Blood and Tears on the way, Trouble, The Wolf, and from Facelift, the debut from Alice in Chains, we have We Die Young, kind of a statement, I think, of the 90s and of, I guess, the grunge scene.
Generation
in a
Next
weird way. Yeah, it was sort of a generational statement. And then Pantera's Domination from Cowboys from Hell, and then we'll end with a nice surprise for you. So,
that you should know off the first note.
Yeah, you should. You should. Enjoy Blood and Tears.
Since you've been gone, I hear you been crying blood and tears. All alone in your misery, so alone. Could you have been to see? Since I've been gone, I hear you been crying. You cried a thousand tears, darling, don't despair. I know your heart still bleeds, darling, don't you care? There's love in yourself. All alone in your misery, so all alone you are lost endlessly. Since you've been gone, I hear you been crying. You cried a thousand tears, darling, don't despair. I know your heart still bleeds, darling, don't you care? You cried a thousand tears, darling, don't despair. I know your heart still bleeds.
consumes you and calls you a friend. It's a twisted ball. Binds your life steel and manipulates the will to be. And it's hard to see how soon we forget when there's nothing else left to destroy. It's a useless play. Your eyes will see the dawn of the day and the legend of the wall. Those words that stare into your soul. Ask yourself you will. It's domination. Pushed into living hell. Domination. Yeah. And now Black Dot is reaching out into infinity. Bodies suspended by chains over razors and nails. It's a penalty. Each razor a vice and each nail must demise of your life. Grim construction and light blade a trick sealed you in brick by brick till you're rammed, forcing you to bend. Your eyes will see the dawn of the day and the legend on the wall. Those words that stare into your soul. Ask yourself you will. It's domination. Pushed into living hell. Oh, domination.
from Slayer's Seasons in the Abyss. And Domination from Pantera, We Die Young, Alice in Chains, Trouble's the Wolf, and then Blood and Tears from Mr. Glenn. So obviously, all of you know Slayer. And all of you know how great of a record Seasons of the Abyss is. I mean, along with Cowboys from Hell, these were two kind of almost everybody owned these records probably if you were...
this was the year of the Slayer Blood Pack, too.
Oh, yes. Which has a great version of Seasons of the Abyss with some...
cellos.
Oh, yeah, cellos and stuff in the background.
The only bum out thing is the
blood dried.
Yeah, I know one person that still has one that the blood's still in good shape.
Really? Mine's okay. Mine's okay.
Is it? I don't have it, so I never bought it. It was at the register for $10, and I was like, for a single?
I think that was one that I begged Chris. Chris had it for a long time, and he knew what a big Slayer fan I was, and he eventually, I don't know, we worked out some kind of trade. I'm not for sure what
Try to trade a Rhapsody CD
my first child I sold or something like that. But what's interesting about that song, I was just telling Mark this, and I don't think you knew this. Mm-hmm. Born of Fire was a leftover song from the Rain and Blood sessions, and hence I think that's why it has a little bit more intensity than some of the other songs on the record.
Yeah, it's a little more straightforward too.
Sure, and it's got a little more snap and punch to it, kind of like Rain and Blood did. Mm-hmm. Not that that's the reason I picked it. I picked it because it's a great song. But this record, Seasons, was in a way kind of the peak of the Slayer evolution. I think it's where they had to go. They had done the fast thing. They had kind of done the sort of slow, despairing type stuff with South of Heaven.
Yeah.
And this is sort of a combination of the two styles, but it's a combination, plus it's more refined and it's more commercial. And this album almost went platinum, which is really hard to believe. But I mean, this is a record that kind of changed things for my group of friends, because we would watch Headbangers Ball and see those Seasons in the Abyss and the War Ensemble videos constantly, and that was what sort of got us to have the bravery to go out and buy Slayer records.
Yeah.
And I think the first thing I bought was I couldn't find this at the record store that I went to, and I really wanted to buy Slayer, so I ended up buying Decade of Aggression, which I guess in a way is like a greatest hits, because it's the live record.
Yeah, live records I wouldn't recommend as your first record by a band,
but
unless it's
but Slayer
Unleashed in the East for Priest.
Yeah, that's true. But Slayer pulls off a pretty good live show.
Oh yeah, it's good. You get a little bit of the crowd banter, so you get a kind of a feeling of what the guys are like.
Plus, at that point,
see a guy going down, give him a hand, all right?
Give him a hand. Yeah. There's a little song called but the thing that was nice about that is I think at that point the Metal Blade records were hard to find. They weren't like readily available just at any record store. You had to go.
Yeah, they reissued them shortly after that, I believe.
I think so. So that was the only place, like for my group of friends, that we could hear the Antichrist and Hell Awaits and things like that. So it was kind of nice. But I think that came out in 91, so I don't even know why I'm talking about Decade of Aggression. But Seasons, I mean, this was probably right around the time when you were starting to buy stuff, right? 1990, you were probably...
A little before that, but yeah. This was the first Slayer record I think I bought.
Did you?
Yeah. Because it was back in, the days of tape trading and making mixtapes for people and all that kind of stuff. So I had a ton of stuff on tape, but not necessarily buying it because it was... And at this point, tapes were still kind of untested as far as like, should I wait and get it on CD? It's like $5 more on CD. But then, that was that bad road everybody went down with like, dude, I got like 185 tapes. What do I do with these now?
I had 350. I was in rough shape. I mean, I was a Columbia House whore for like 4 years.
That's how I got all my Danzigs. That's how I filled in my Slayer catalog.
Yeah, Slayer. Yeah. You name it. Panteras.
The Cat had accounts at certain points.
Yeah. That makes
Cornelius Rudolph.
That makes me think of a buddy of ours named Dan Timlin. He had like 7 or 8 different things going.
They're not going to come
down
after you.
Hamtramck. So. But this and that Pantera song that we just heard as well, Domination. Again, you're starting to see what thrash was evolving to in 1990. It was complex. It was epic. It started in a way with Injustice for All, and it kind of went from there.
It showed people you could have stuff on the radio that was 8 or 9 minutes long, like One and things like that.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, Seasons, the title track, it was 5-6 minutes long. And in a way, I think this kind of commercialization of thrash without losing its integrity at this point, it hasn't gotten to like Load and Euthanasia and Countdown to Extinction, some of those realms where it's kind of hit or miss. It's very questionable. I think it influenced some of the older bands to embrace a more heavy sound, and obviously, the band that probably is most evident of that, especially in 1990, is Priest.
Priest, the last record with Halford they did.
Yeah, wow,
and
of this era.
Well, of this era, yeah. And then, because Ram It Down had some, they were leaning back toward the more metallic edge, but this is one they just kind of like,
over
actually, they actually gave a lot of the younger bands like a run for their money as far as like, speed and just sonic brutality kind of thing.
Sure. And the new drummer, was it Scott Travis?
Scott Travis,
yeah. And I mean, he's kind of a game changer.
Man.
Yeah, he's a game changer on Painkiller. And, Painkiller, I think for a long time, I just thought it was later era Judas Priest. I didn't hear this record for years. It wasn't until Sound of Perseverance.
Oh, really?
It wasn't until Sound of Perseverance.
All the time.
It wasn't.
Painkiller video.
It wasn't in our era.
Huh.
We started watching Headbangers like late 91, early 92. So I think it had probably played itself out. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I caught a couple Headbangers here and there, but I was, 1990. I was in like 5th grade. I don't know if I really knew.
I didn't have cable, so
to
it was
stay awake at that.
Yeah, I was
point.
like hanging out at Chris's house, and his mom would be yelling at us to shut the TV off. No, man, it's the Napalm stuff for the children videos coming on next.
Yeah, exactly. But so for me it was odd. I always thought people talked about Painkiller being heavy, but I kind of looked at the cover, and the cover
it's
doesn't
pretty throwback. For coming out in this era, it doesn't necessarily harken like, oh, this is something cool and relevant.
But then when you put it on, I mean, from start to finish, it's a great record. And for a lot of Priest fans, this is like one of their
Touch of Evil, dude.
Their favorite. Yeah, Touch of Evil is one of my favorite songs. Unfortunately, it's too long and a little too slow, and so we wanted to play something that kind of showed the velocity of this record. And Between the Hammer and the Anvil is a pretty solid track.
Good meat and potatoes song.
Exactly. But again, this is kind of the peak of Priest as well. Some would argue the peak of Slayer. You got the sort of the last vestige of this era of Priest. The last vestige of this era of Anthrax as well, Persistence of Time.
Yeah, and then the following year we'll have the Black Record, which pretty much puts a nail in the coffin of everything.
That was the end of thrash in a way, 91. But you have in this next set that we're going to be playing, we're going to start with Priest, then we're going to get into Anthrax, Persistence of Time, and Megadeth, Rest in Peace, and Kreator's Coma of Souls. And I think 3 things that those records have in common is, for a lot of people, not only is it the end of the era, but in a way, for Megadeth and Kreator, it's really the end of a pretty good creative period and the beginning of sort of a drought for a long time, especially for Kreator.
Kreator, they have their handful of turds with Renewal and a couple others in that era, and it was just... I think the whole thing was, okay, it seems like a lot of these bands are going through this thing where we've been around for 10 or 15 years. What do we have to do to stay relevant? And instead of just like sticking to their guns, which bands like Maiden and a lot of, have kind of proven over time that that's what people want.
Sure.
With all this like flux, it's nice to have something that's consistently good.
And even Slayer survived doing that as well. And I don't want
Slayer didn't go quite as deep into the garbage can as everybody else.
No. And I think the reason I mentioned Seasons being the end of an era is because Lombardo leaves, and it's the end of the classic lineup. And Lombardo's,
but they changed their sound quite a bit too on that next record.
Sure, and Divine Intervention, which is a good record, but it's just different. It's just kind of a different sound. But
it made me mad at the time, but I'm fine with it
now. Now you like it. But yeah, Persistence of Time, again, similar to Seasons and Injustice, and even Rest in Peace, in that it was very epic, longer songs. Everything's orchestrated in a way, but it wasn't like a prog record necessarily. It was still very thrashy, but it was intelligent,
all full of hits too. There wasn't turd songs.
Yeah,
like on most of these records, like Coma of Souls, Rust in Peace, Persistence of Time, outside of some of the goofy intermittent stuff between songs and Anthrax, which is to be expected, but for the most part, they're front to back fantastic records.
Yeah, and this is one of your favorite Anthrax records, right? Persistence
That's
of Time.
the only one I really ever listened to as a kid.
Yeah. And
outside of like Caught in a Mosh and Indians and stuff.
Yeah,
but,
a couple songs from.
I just never thought to go out and buy it.
Yeah,
it's one of those things where you got $10 and it's like, am I going to get a Mordred tape or Anthrax? I'll get Anthrax.
Yeah, no doubt. And this is one of the first Anthraxes I had on tape as well. We listened to God at the time. At the time, I don't think we knew any better. That was kind of like the hit song or whatever. But it was a cover. Joe Jackson, I think. Something like that. I can't remember offhand. But, the last Joey Belladonna record, you know, and then, you know, Anthrax with Belladonna and John Bush, I don't even want to compare them. They're two separate bands.
They're two bands.
I mean, in a sense. At this point, even though Scotty Ian is kind of the main personality, I feel like he's kind of in balance a little bit with Belladonna in terms of like having influence over the band, and with, you know, Scotty Ian, I think takes total control as soon as Belladonna leaves, and Bush
look
comes
where
in,
that takes him.
and well, takes some good places for
Well, if with
one and
Bush-
a half records. Yeah.
Yeah. 1.5 exactly.
Yeah. Stomp 242 like has 4 good songs on it, but yeah, and then of course Megadeth, Rust in Peace, which we've done an entire
show on, so I don't think we need to
no
go into too much. But I think this is the only actually worthy record of Megadeth to even buy.
Ooh, see, I would still throw Peace Cells on that.
It's not good all the way through,
but it has good enough stuff
it's about
on
60%.
it that it
It's
makes
a 60-40.
Yeah, 60% is pretty good. Pretty good.
That won't get you through high school.
That's true. Well, actually,
It'll skate you by.
It might get you a D-.
Yeah.
All the way through. I don't know. That's debatable. I mean, Rust in Peace
it's a taste
is
thing.
very easily their best record.
Yeah.
You know, and definitely coming off the backs of a kind of an uneven record like.
Killing's My Business.
No, Killing My
the
Business was
first one.
85. Why can't I think of it? So Far, So Good, So What?
Yeah.
You know, which was
Unfortunately, I have that record too.
it has like 3 or 4 good songs on it. It's an uneven record. You know, this is like a very focused. I mean, I think Mustaine was like cleaning up at this point, so
Either that or he was in the throes of it because it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, his playing is
It's like
phenomenal.
riff-tastic.
Yeah, and we're gonna play some "Take No Prisoners" from this guy, and then from Anthrax's "Persistence of Time," we got "Belly of the Beast." We'll start things off with Judas Priest, and then from there we'll go into Kreator's "Coma of Souls," "People of the Lie," which is
Anti-Nazi song, basically.
and kind of a sing-along song.
Don't look at me as if you didn't know.
Exactly. And then we'll end with a nice surprise that will sort of transition us near the end. And before I go, I almost forgot, I'm sort of out of favor. I should mention 5 other big kind of thrash records that came out this year that fit in with all this was Forbidden, Twisted Into Form, which featured a young Paul Bostoff, who would go on and drum for Slayer when Lombardo left.
Good record.
Destruction's Release from Agony.
Not a good record.
Yeah, not great. Death Angel Act 3, which is actually pretty solid. It might be their best from start to finish.
Well, and they're like 14, 15 years old, too. So it was,
Well,
they're
this point they're like 18.
Yeah, but we heard about them that, oh my God, these
yeah.
kids put out this record at this point.
And then Testament Souls of Black, which
I enjoy.
you're a pretty good fan of.
Yeah.
That one's I'm less familiar with than some of the others. And then Swallowed in Black from Sadist, which is pretty rocking. And so enjoy Between the Hammer and the Anvil from Judas Priest.
without a heart. You tear the innocent souls apart. You shovel your conscience to the grave. You walk this earth without a heart. Your uniform couldn't be taken off. A tattoo burned into your flesh. Your mind, your voice. These are your instruments of death. How could you dare to be so bold? You only did as you were told. Marionettes dancing in time to the apologetic line for all of our Demonization. Now the soul belongs to me. Get down on your fucking knees. Into the dark, the doctor bleeding heart. This fucking world is mine. I should know it never die. Wicked, wicked, wicked.
That was The Awakening from Sweden's Merciless.
Spelled correctly, unlike Merciful Fate.
Yes. From The Awakening. And then we, of course, had Kreator, People Alive, Megadeth, Take No Prisoners, Anthrax's Belly the Beast, and then started everything off with Judas Priest. So now we've sort of, the torch has been passed from Kreator, who I've always towed the line of kind of being on the extreme end of thrash, to Merciless, which I think purists say is a thrash band, but definitely they're pushing the envelope towards
they're leaning more on the death metal side for sure,
towards the death metal sound. And again, we're sort of in the midst of the birth of death metal at this point. 89, 90, 91, 92 is kind of like seen as the classic era.
Basically, everybody kind of getting their shit together. Demos have finally gotten around, and people are actually getting record deals at this point.
Yep, it's kind of the rise of the Earaches, the Roadrunners, even the beginnings, kind of the early beginnings of Century Medias and stuff like that. Oh, yeah. Although it's really more 91, 92. But this was a year that saw Nocturnus, The Key, Death, Spiritual Healing, which we had to cut for time, but we've devoted so many shows to Death.
It's got such a great cover, it's worth buying it just for that.
It is.
Great Ed Ripka cover.
Great, and that's a record where I'd want to play a longer song like Spiritual Healing or something from, which is like 8 minutes long. Master, a great Florida band. Benediction, Subconscious Terror out of
good record.
Britain. Yeah, you're a big Benediction fan.
It's the pre-Barney Greenway mouthpiece before he got into Napalm.
So Subconscious Terror came out after Harmony Corruption, even though Barney had left prior to that?
He was on the previous, whatever the EP was before.
Oh, okay. And then Carnage, Dark Recollections, which is
Mike Mott, Johan Leva.
Yeah.
And half people from Dismember and a couple other dudes.
Yeah.
And great record.
So it's a great collection of like things that were kind of, a lot of the tracks were kind of sitting around for a few years on demos and things like that. And a lot of those songs ended up kind of becoming the template for like Everflowing Stream. Dismember.
A lot of them were Dismember songs too.
Yeah. So it's kind of crazy, but and then Mott leaves Carnage. That was kind of his band to join Carcass, for after Symphonies. And
so they basically like, okay, let's not call it Carnage anymore, let's go back to Dismemberizer or Dismemberizer,
which Nicky Anderson couldn't spell.
He didn't have enough paper.
Didn't have enough room.
How about just Dismember? Okay.
Sounds good. You can read all about it in the recent Hall of Fame in Decibel.
Yeah.
And then Cannibal Corpse's debut, Eaten Back to Life. Mayhem didn't release, but they did record live in Leipzig in this year. Master's Hammer, Ritual. Weren't they from Czech Republic? Master's Hammer?
I think so.
Real, kind of like almost the beginning of the
Tormentor type
second wave
black
of
metal
black
stuff.
metal,
Yeah.
like in between the first and the second wave, and then Cadaver's Hallucinating Anxiety. So there was some other big death metal records coming out, but I would argue, and I think you would agree, that clearly the biggest death metal record that was released this year had a lot to do with Merciless's The Awakening, because they also hailed from Sweden.
Left Hand Path, buddy. We did an entire episode on that as well. You should go back and check it out.
That we did.
From Entombed.
And it's hard to it's hard to talk about how important bands like Merciless and Entombed were to the birth of the whole Swedish death metal scene. If you get Daniel Eckerath's Swedish death metal book, I think Merciless and Entombed are probably the two bands he probably talks about the most in the first half of the book.
Yeah. And Merciless is a band most people don't know who the hell they are.
Yeah, but if you get a hold of the Projection of the Stained Mind comp, or
Merciless, the Colored Funeral record,
weren't they the French band?
Yeah, stay away from that one. This is a different. They've got a cool logo with a bunch of like weird claws and stuff coming out of it.
I wouldn't say stay away from Merciless, but it's not this.
It's not. If you're going in like thinking, oh, this is some cool Swedish thrash stuff, no.
And but Merciless, the LES, the I band, not the Y band. That's how you remember it. The I band, Merciless
Be
with
selfish.
the I. They were kind of the band that I think a lot of the other Swedish bands were kind of like looking up to, you know, as kind of being the godfathers of that whole scene. Even though they weren't necessarily putting out death metal records, they were definitely extreme enough and competent enough with their
They're slightly older kids.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, the 14-year-old, pick up your guitar for the first time stuff.
And even though Nicky was listening to a lot of stuff from, the States and from England, Repulsion records and punk records and things like that, I think, even bands like Merciless and Candlemass were kind of the twin towers of Swedish metal that were influencing young bands like Dismember, Carnage, and
complete opposite ends of the spectrum too.
Yeah, totally. So, but yeah, Entombed, Left Hand Path, we're gonna hear "But Life Goes On" from that record, and then probably the other big death metal record, along with maybe Death's Spiritual Healing of this year, was Obituary's masterpiece, "Cause of Death," which is kind of really along with Spiritual Healing, I guess, is the kind of introduction of James Murphy to sort of the world of extreme metal. And I like his playing probably more on Obituary because he stands out more on that record.
Completely, because it's just Celtic Frost riffs, super slow. It's the Tardis and what is his name, Trevor
Pears,
Pears or whatever, isn't the most technically proficient guitarist, but it didn't matter because they made catchier than shit riffs.
Oh man, yeah. And Memories Remain, which we're gonna play, is just, again, it's just one of several songs we could have pulled off of Cause of Death. I mean, the song, the beautiful thing about Obituary, it's kind of like with Bolt Thrower or Vader or whatever, is there's not really a lot of difference between one Obituary song and another.
Production value sometimes.
It's just a catchy riff here or there. They catch a groove. It's like Celtic Frost. Like
it's a formula, yeah.
And Cause of Death is almost the perfect, I think it's the most perfect use of the Obituary formula that they ever are put together.
Well, because there's lyrics too.
This is true. Yeah, they're not just blathering, stuff, which we'll talk about soon, I think, when we talk about Slowly We Rot. But this might have been the lawn mowing record for me. Because I remember getting this cassette tape. It was used. I was on the way to go get some pizza with my mom. We stopped by New Moon Records where Mark and I worked, and I had been eyeing this used Obituary tape, and the cover kind of freaked me out.
These are probably all tapes that I sold. Me and Chris sold.
I guarantee it was one of your guys' tapes.
When we made the big transition over, you guys bought all
I had
tapes.
a CD player at the time, but I also...
But you could get a used tape for $2.
I looked at that used tape for $2. I was like... And all I had at that point was a cassette player for my headphones, and so it worked perfectly. And so that's why, whenever I bought a used cassette like an Obituary, it just became a lawn mowing tape, So I and the funny thing is on Cause of Death, it has all those like in between things linking all the songs, and so like when you listen to it on cassette, you have no idea what song is what. Like I would think for years that certain songs was like Body Bag. I'm like, oh wait, no, that's part of Infected. Oh my god, So I never knew any of the track names because it just was like one giant bleed of Celtic Frost riffing, you know. But
gets the lawn mode quickly.
It is what it is, you know. But Memories Remain is a good tune, and then we're gonna kind of close things out this evening or day, depending on when you're listening to this, with the debut from Deicide.
We almost bookended it with Glenn's, but
we did almost. So then we moved Danzig from the beginning to the second song.
Yeah.
But this is a different kind of Glenn.
Glenn Benton,
equally strange in the uniqueness of his personality.
Yeah.
Burn a upside down cross tattoo in his head.
He was very provocative.
Yes, he was. He liked to stir up trouble.
Although there wasn't a whole lot of substance beyond it. It was more an image.
No, and the first couple Deicide records, probably the first three, are really pretty rocking. And even though I think I looked down on this band for a long time because I kind of thought they were kind of unintelligent compared to what the Swedish stuff and some of the things.
Well, that and just the stage banter and
and the fans were kind of, and I don't want to.
It was a more. It seemed at the time to be a more of a meathead mentality. Like you just want to get in the pit and break stuff basically.
Sure. And I think out of respect, I was scared of Deicide fans, like I was scared of some of the Cannibal fans. They were just a little too that wasn't like I wasn't into getting the shit kicked out of me in a mosh pit.
But the funny thing, when I saw Deicide with Vader and like 90, 91, something like that, was the first time Vader came to the States, and right before Deicide went on, they were like combing their hair up and stuff.
Hey, rock and roll.
Yeah,
you had to put on a big show, so
I guess
that's funny. That doesn't surprise me in a way, you know. And they hail along with Obituary from the Florida scene, you know, and they were part of that whole Florida thing that was brewing in the Morris Sound Studios and stuff, and that kind of became the sound of American death metal for a long time.
Well, and this kind of brought Satanism to the forefront again. You know, after Slayer gave it to us in the 80s, like Deicide was another big proponent of that. That I think more vocally than a lot of other bands. They
were pretty scared. I mean, we were scared of them, you know, from the second we found Legion, their second record, like Satan spawned the Keiko Demon and all this. Like, what the hell are these guys up to? So. But a good, nice trio of diverse, all three kind of doing a different kind of sound. So, but we want to know what you think. Send us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com or leave us some info on iTunes. We've actually been getting a lot of feedback.
Rating. That'd be great.
Yeah, it'd be cool. And we want to mention that because this is episode 99, and we've got a big one coming up on the horizon, episode number 100, and the most crucial year in metal.
Exactly. We got a contest.
Yeah.
We don't have exactly, we don't know exactly what's going to be offered in the goodie bag, but
it does involve Decibel. Decibel magazine.
It'll involve several other labels as well. So there's going to be plenty of crap to give away, but it's not going to be crap. It's going to be good quality stuff. Albert,
the editor-in-chief of Decibel, has assured me he has a couple of ideas that he wants to throw out to us. So definitely participate in that. We'll be posting some information on our website, requiempodcast.com, and also throwing some stuff up on Facebook. I know a lot of you who out there listening are Facebook friends with us, so check us out, Mark and Jason. That's our Facebook page and stuff. But and then Mark is actually putting together a little collection of your prints from Decibel magazine, right?
Actually, it's all my music related stuff that I've done. It's going to be about 70 pages. Metal, the illustration of Mark Rudolph.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. So you can get that on the website as well. So if you're into the artistic side of all this stuff.
It'll be hitting the shelves November.
Yeah, there you go. Nice. Okay, coming down the pike, and we are putting together our collections of Eclipse and Requiems. We're actually starting to get a move on creating an anthology of that because we've kind of been inspired. An omnibus.
Yes, it's going to be telephone book sized.
So, but 1990, definitely a year not to forget, and in our humblest opinions at this point, the second most crucial year in metal history. So we hope you've enjoyed episode 99. We hope you look forward to the episode 100 as much as we do. And we've got Entombed, But Life Goes On, Memories Remain from Obituary, and Deicide, Day of Darkness. So for Requiem Metal Podcast, I am Jason.
I'm Mark. And here's to another 100 episodes.
Oh, sentimental.
But my soul is Let us pray to